Now, NDE Radio, a weekly exploration of near-death experiences and similar encounters with the other side. Now, here's your host, Lee Witting.
Welcome to NDE Radio with Lee Witting, whether you're listening on TalkZone, by podcast, through the archives of our ad-free shows on our YouTube channel, or connected through the incredible content of our Facebook page. Our guest today, Lynn K. Russell, writes this about herself. As a child, I was the only spiritual person in our family. My grandfather's death, when I was around 8 or 9, made me realize my mortality. My mother was an atheist, and when I asked her what happens when you die, she told me nothing. You just disappear. I was a little kid. I didn't want to vanish, and I became terrified of death. In my mid-teens, I began studying the various religions, philosophies, and spirituality of the world. I studied their histories and how they got the way they are. I also studied the offshoot churches and what they taught about death. I became a family counselor for almost 30 years and had many years as a workshop facilitator, giving talks and teaching spirituality. It was when Lynn was researching OBEs, out-of-body experiences, on the NDERF org website that she became fascinated with the underlying profound spiritual knowledge within NDE reports. And after joining that chat group, she answered a request from Dr. Jeffrey Long and his wife Jody for a volunteer to do research, and ended up studying some 2,500 death experiences. In the beginning, Lynn writes, I was interested in the experiences these people were having, but after a while, I was more interested in the spiritual learning within the accounts. The information went together with the years of study I had done and took me much further than I ever imagined. Her writings on the subject include her books, The Wonder of You, What the Near-Death Experience Tells You About Yourself, Warple, Kids' Adventure Book on Oneness, Kindness is Contagious, Love is Powerful, and her latest, titled Beyond NDEs, The Next Step in Near-Death Experience Research. It's the spiritual implications of that book that's the subject of our show today. Lynn K. Russell, welcome to NDE Radio.
Thank you for having me.
Lynn, in your book, you describe 3 spiritually transformative experiences that happened to you while you were doing housework. Tell us about those.
Yes, they really were marvelous. It was in 1973, and the first one, I was doing the dishes, and I didn't have my mind thinking about anything other than the dishes or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, the point is that all of a sudden my awareness, I think, I don't know how to explain it. I became aware of an atom tree that was out in the backyard beyond the window, and the apple tree was filled. I became the tree, and the tree became me, and I was blown away. And then I became every kind of life form that I could think of, and that it became me. There wasn't sort of like kind of sort of almost. We were each other, one. There was no differences. So that was the first experience, and that only lasted maybe a half a minute at the most. The second experience, I was washing fingerprints off the walls, and at that time I had 3 kids, and the 2 older ones were in school afternoon, and the youngest one was down for a nap. So the house was always quiet. This sense of spirituality always happened during quiet times. Anyway, I'm washing these fingerprints off the wall, and all of a sudden, I wasn't seeing the wall. I was seeing an atom, and I was seeing the nuclei with the electrons going around, and that expanded to our solar system with the sun and the planets going around, and that expanded to the galaxy, and it just was like the micro and the macro universe. It just kept big. But while I was having this awareness, I was being given messages or understanding, I think is the better way I would say it. So my understanding was that this didn't just happen, that there was order and planning, and there was a consciousness behind all of this. And that was cool.
In your book, you said an independent consciousness knew exactly what was needed to do and got busy doing it. And then you quote him or it, your being is intricately connected with the operation of the universe, it told me.
Yes, that's the message I got next, was that my being was intricately connected with the operation. And that frightened me. I didn't like that. I did not want anything to do with it, because I somehow thought that meant I was going to be expectations. Like, if I'm a part of the universe, what is expected of me? It just, I mean, the logic isn't there, but it was for me. Anyway, so that was the end of the experience. And probably because I was uncomfortable. And so it ended. The third experience was again in the afternoon, all quiet. And I'm picking up toys and tidying up the living room. And I'm standing in the living room. And all of a sudden, I was very aware of a presence that was in the room with me. Now, I couldn't see anything. There was nothing I could see, but I could strongly feel that there was a being, some kind of presence there. And there was more love than I can't describe it. There's no words. It just was, it took me over. And it was like a huge blanket of love wrapped around me. And just pouring right into me. Anyway, I sort of felt like I had a connection to this something, and I wasn't hearing anything, just feeling. And then I heard words. And this time the words I felt like they were external. And the words said, "This is where you came from, and this is where you will return." And that was the end of my experiences, but it left me walking 3 feet off the ground for a long, long time, quite a few months.
Wow. Well, those were your personal experiences, and then you went on to do all this study. And I'm excited to have this conversation because, as I mentioned to you, my favorite description for individual NDEs is that they're like individual pieces of a picture puzzle. And it's only when we put them together that we'll be able to glimpse past the personal differences to see the big picture. And you've had the chance to do that with your 2,500 NDE studies. What was it like doing research with Dr. Long?
Oh, wonderful. He's very cooperative and friendly, and no difficulties at all. It was a good experience. Now, let me explain how the research was done. Dr. Long has NDERF, and then people send their reports in about their experience, and then there's a huge questionnaire after. It's quite lengthy. And so then I took all that information and divided it all up. How many people saw other beings, and how many people saw the light, and how many people traveled, and where did they travel, and those kind of things. So I broke it all up, and then I would send it back to Dr. Long. And so that was, but I did have the opportunity to talk personally to quite a few people as well. So that was special.
Yeah, that's excellent. Well, I'd like to go through your wonderful book with you. What did all those NDEs tell you about the nature of light and love? I noticed the one quote from you that I'd like to read first. "Entangled within the brilliant light is a being filled with more love than anyone knew was possible, as if every molecule of the universe was awash in love. And in fact, it is."
Yes.
That's from your book.
Yes. And that's pretty much, there is more to it though. Love is for us an emotion, a feeling, and something we all want. But the source, love is actually the source's essence. The essence of the source is love. And it also is the power that the source uses to create with. take these off. So that's another aspect of love.
Yeah. Another quote from your book: caught up in this magnificent radiance, many NDErs realized the light was far greater than simple illumination. It was a being, an intelligence that intimately knew every minuscule part of them, and like a loving parent, interacted with them on a personal and caring level. So it's not only that the entire creation, I guess you could say, including us, is built out of love, but it's a conscious love that is capable of interacting.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And highly intelligent. Yes. And I think that's a very important point, because that whole business of the light is so important. Some people were able to see the light from afar, but other ones entered into the light and just were surrounded by the light. And then they gained information about how creation happened, or what it was, what is this God, or is what the reality of this being. And but the big one was that some people had the opportunity to enter into the light, and they absolutely melted and became the light. And to me, that was so significant, because when that happened, they became creators with the light in exactly the same way. They were the light. And that told me huge amounts, to just think that we are part of the light. That's
one of the things that I ask from time to time on my show is whether or not the ultimate goal is for us to merge entirely back into the light and lose our individuality. And listeners hate to hear that, because we don't want to lose ourselves, our selfness. Our ego is a part of our being as well. But do you think that that's possibly the ultimate goal of our existence, is to merge back and become absolutely one, like a drop in the ocean?
Yeah, I do. Because people repeatedly talk about going home, and home is like with big capital letters and flashing. And the other thing is that the ecstasy and the absolute bliss that they feel when they are there is beyond description. So I think that, yes. The other thing is that you don't forget the lives that you've lived, all of them, every single life that you've ever lived. It's always right there. All you have to do is think, and boom, it's there. So it's not like you throw your life away and it had no significance. And another point on that is that because we are a part of the light, our existence is giving back to the light. And this life that we are living is giving back to the source. And that's our goal.
You also write, love is the tether that binds the soul to the source. It was such an integral part of the being of light that it was closer than the radiance from the light. It was as close as the molecules of living organisms or the electrons of an atom, an inseparable, intricate part of the being of love. I thought that was, because when we think of giving and receiving, we think of two beings standing apart from each other. But if we're linked at the atomic level, that's a pretty profound closeness.
Yeah. I know, it just thrilled me. This whole stuff just electrifies me. Yeah.
One of the great things about your book is you do draw passages from some of these experiencers to exemplify what you're talking about. You cover many topics. It's not just love, although you said at the beginning that the whole book could be about love. But we'll explore some of these other things like time as well. But when I typed this up, I put it in italics. So I'm thinking it might have been from one of the NDErs themselves. Every cell is gently caressed in the all-abundant love, honoring and glorifying every bit of who I am. Love that flowed without any conditions or effort, omnipresent and very real. Love abundantly poured without restrictions, conditions, or commitments, creating a love-based matrix from within my being. I viewed the reality of unconditional love from the perspective of spirit rather than ego.
Mm.
Do you think those are your words or one of your
No,
quotes?
it's a quote.
Yeah, that's okay. That's what I thought.
Yeah.
There's another one from a woman actually who named Debbie Sue who committed suicide.
Yes.
And one of the things that should be very encouraging to listeners is the fact that it's a condition of the heart. It's not so much the actions of a depressed person when they commit suicide. If they are part of the love, and they all are part of the love, then they don't have to worry that the old Catholic teaching that suicide was an unforgivable sin is just not true.
No. Whatever we do is forgiven, because on the other side, there are no negatives.
Anyway, Debbie Sue wrote, that being was composed of love. It created love, emitted love, and directed love. It lived on love. It was love. Love, the power. Everything in that entire experience was the other divine loving being. With that divine loving being was purely good and powered by love. That being knew all of everything I ever was and loved me.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Her story was very poignant for me. It just really touched me. And I actually did chat with her. She was one of the people I got a chance to meet.
Did it change her life?
Oh, yes, of course. Yes, definitely.
Okay, because that's always a measure of how impactful these NDEs can be on people.
Yes, yes.
How much it changes them.
Yes.
And for a suicide, I would think it would be a big change indeed.
Yes.
Well, let me throw another quote at you then. This was from an experiencer named Ray, who said, I became love, my entire being, every strand of my spirit spreading throughout the universe had become love times a million billion.
So
Wow.
that part about spreading out in the universe, see, that's one of the things repeatedly that people, and that's one of I call universal elements, is that over and over, every single person says that they felt connected with everything and everything connected with them, just like my apple tree, you know? Yeah.
And then to tie it to our life on Earth, a woman named Lisa said, the being of light showed me all that was really important in life was the love we felt, the loving acts we performed, the loving words we spoke, and the loving thoughts we held. Love was all that was important. Only love was real.
Yes.
So we can actualize, these incredible understandings in the smallest events in our ordinary lives, in our everyday lives.
Yes, it's every day. I read the news today and I was reading about some situation that really was upsetting. And I thought, is this what we want to choose? Because we're making this existence. It's, we're the creator and we're creating this.
Yeah.
But we need to bring in that love.
So now I thought we might talk about some of the different aspects, as you do in your book, of near-death experience reports. And I think the next thing you covered in the book was the tunnel. And I'll start with a quote from a woman named Stella. The tunnel was for her, because they're all pretty different in many ways. The tunnel was semi-transparent, and I saw points of light like distant stars becoming rays of irregular lights, like the headlights of a car speeding down a curved road. My speed kept growing until the light could no longer reach me, and I saw the tunnel was one giant, barely discernible curve, and then I was home, which I thought was lovely.
Mm-hmm.
But some people feel like they're going through a tunnel. Some people are instantly wherever the tunnel leads to and don't remember a tunnel at all.
Right. Yes, not everybody goes through the tunnel. I would say the majority of people do, so about 50%, but the other 50% is divided up by immediately going to wherever they're going to go, or they are find themselves out in outer space looking down and being a part of the universe. And the other one is through the void. And sometimes people will, and I'll go back to this void in a sec, and sometimes people will have the light and or relatives or their guides there waiting for them. So, and it's right in their room, and they take them sometimes through a tunnel and sometimes not. So there are varying ways that people can leave their body and go to wherever their destination is.
Yeah. I've had at least one person describe the tunnel they went through as being made of angels. And then
wonderful.
Yeah, the wings of the angels, they formed the tunnel. And then another who saw their life review on the walls of the tunnel as they were going through it.
Yes, I've heard that before. One of the things that I want to point out about the tunnel is that no two tunnels are alike. Some are gray and foggy, and some are bright colors, and other ones they have doorways along the way, and they're very, very, very different from one another. Some people feel like it's warp speed through with the science shows and the outer space, and when you go fast, all these stars, they feel that that's how they go. So it really does vary depending on the individual. And I just wanted to, I said I'd mention the void. The void for some people is, and most people actually, it's blackness. You're in complete blackness with nothing there. And actually, most people don't feel uncomfortable about that at all. They know they're safe. They feel, they can feel the comfort and love. They just can't see where they are, or don't know where they are. And so they'll start asking questions, and pretty soon they'll see a pinprick of light that gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And pretty soon they're wherever they're going to go.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the painting by Hieronymus Bosch from the 1500s of the tunnel? It's a large tunnel, and you don't see the end of it because it's curved, and there are angels accompanying the bodies of humans into the tunnel. It's quite an amazing painting.
Yeah. So that I can see a painting doing it.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about time. You wrote, without exception, NDErs report that time and space don't exist. Our physical existence is so enmeshed with time and space that it is next to impossible to visualize life without them. And confusion reigns because NDErs share their experiences sequentially, which indicates time and space. Talk about that a little bit.
Well, I think that in order for us to be in this existence and giving back to the source, we need time. But time is an illusion. It's an illusion that is created so that we can exist in physical. It's a physical thing completely. And so that's what I think time is.
Would you say a dimension like that actually separates us from everything except the now, is that also made out of love? Is that a love invention, as it were?
Well, I think everything is made out of love. Actually, there isn't anything that isn't, because the whole universe is love, and it's because it's from the source, and source's love is what creates it. So everything is made of love. It's just that whether we acknowledge it and recognize it, because the other part of that is thought, and what we think about is what we create. And so we're the creators, as I said earlier. And so we create through the way we see things and how we think about things and the choices we make.
And thought is a creative act?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So did I answer your question about time?
Yes, I think so. I'm sure it's confounding. And one of the reasons that NDErs come back saying, I can't put it in words, or they come back saying, I felt like I spent months there and they were only gone for half a minute, because so much can happen when you step outside of time. It can be forever.
Yes. Well, there is no time there. And that's something that we humans cannot conceive. I cannot get it through my brain to have all these things happening and there's no time. How did that happen? All to happen at once.
The other thing, too, is when some people visit heaven, they meet relatives and friends, even pets. They see sometimes countryside, sometimes cities. And we're going to talk about knowledge next, because that's the way you're covering it in your book. But sometimes they've even seen people studying in libraries, which seems to contradict the notion that as soon as we're there, we are instantaneously in touch with everything and knowing everything we need to know. So did you encounter that in your studies, people seeing people in libraries reading and learning about things?
Yes. But one of the things that we need to understand is that every single aspect of the death experience is created by us. We create our own death experience and whatever it's going to look like. And so if we want to create people in a library reading, we can do that. We can create grandma's house and go and have coffee with her. It was an experience with a young man who had died, and his guides were trying, and I have this in the book, his guides were trying to explain to him how he was the creator of all that he knew. So they said to him, think of anything you want to think. And he thought of his mother's chocolate cake, and there it was in front of him, and he ate
it. That's like the resurrected Jesus eating a piece of broiled fish, isn't it?
I don't know about the resurrection.
Oh, that's just something from last week's gospel reading that occurred to me, that to prove that he was not just a ghost, the story goes that Jesus ate a piece of broiled fish. But then anything is possible, really.
Yeah, that's right. And that's what Anita Moorjani says in her book. And I love this part of her book. And this is that she sees as an example that we're in this humongous warehouse that just goes on in every direction, up, down, sideways, into infinity. And we're looking at a piece that's about as big as a flashlight will run, and we've got all these other choices that we could be making.
You quote Anita Moorjani a good bit, some lovely quotes that I actually will get to in a bit, but her story is if people aren't familiar with it, I don't think I've ever done an interview with her. I've talked to her several times at IANDS meetings, and we've talked about it, but I should check in and see if she'd be willing to come on the show. You say that the knowledge thing, universal knowledge, is one of your favorite elements in all of this. And you wrote, I love learning and I'm thrilled to discover I will be filled with total knowledge. Some people say each question is instantly filled with an understanding of the question, including all the ramifications that connect to it, I guess, including chocolate cake. And others say that without prompting, they are instantly filled with complete knowledge of every question that could be asked. And I knew a woman who had a grand mal seizure out of the blue. She'd never had a seizure, and I don't think ever had one after that. But she said at the moment, her brain was just totally awash in whatever the short circuit is that causes that she had the feeling that she knew the answer to every question she'd ever had.
Yes.
But then when she came out of it, she couldn't remember the answers.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that is what happens repeatedly. And I guess we are allowed to know certain amounts. And after that, some people, although there was a man named Malin Thomas Benedict, I don't know if you know his story.
Yes, I do.
Yeah. And he was able to retain quite a bit of what knowledge that he gained. So I think it's different for different people.
Yes. And maybe it's intended. I mean, we do come back with a message, frequently come back with a message that we should share these stories with others.
Yeah.
No fear of death. That's a common statement from people who've had a near-death experience. And some experiencers have said it seems more real over there, that life on Earth seems more like a matrix reality. Well, this is a question that I had, but if everything is built out of love, isn't this physical reality built out of love as well? I guess we've already answered it, but to say that this is not real here on the planet would be a contradiction if everything is made out of the same love substance.
Yes, actually, I don't agree with the statement that it's not real. I think it is real, very real. And it's just that what we're doing with it is the bottom line. But yes, I think that it is real. But for them, it's not, because when they're on the other side, everything is so much sharper, clearer. They can see better. Everything is better and enhanced to such a degree that this looks like a Mickey Mouse world. And so that's.
Yeah, the intensity is there. The colors, music, musicians especially come back with incredible stories of how beautiful the music is over there.
Yes.
Others don't even mention it. If they're not attuned to it, they've probably not gone to the trouble of creating it for themselves.
Or seeing colors that don't exist here.
Mm.
And that I can't get. I want to see it, but I can't see them.
Well, there are some simulations of that color experience in things like in hallucinogenics like LSD, where people will look at a flower and say it's the essence of flowerness. It's the platonic flower. It's magnificent, and spend it hours looking into a rose or a dandelion or anything that comes to hand. Yeah. But
I wanted to go back to your knowledge piece. Just very briefly, yes, people who ask a question get so much knowledge, and every aspect of that question is answered. So it gets to the point where you don't have any questions left to answer. And the reason why that was exciting for me was because when I was a child, I was assessed as mentally slow, and I was in grade 2 for 3 years. And so I was way, way, way behind. And I just assumed that I was slow and quit school. I was 16 in grade 8, so I quit school. And it wasn't until I was 31 that I found out that I was well above average. But because we're going back in time, and they didn't know about dyslexia or autism or any of those kind of things. And so that was why I wound up with that. But when I found out, it was like, okay, world, here I come. And then I challenged myself to find out what I could learn. What could I do? I didn't know. And so that's why I love learning.
Yeah. Unfortunately, our education system is geared to deal with the average, not with the handicapped and not with the brilliant. Sometimes the best thing is to just get out of the system and go off on your own.
Yeah.
Which it sounds like you did.
Yes.
It's a blessing to realize that. Yeah. Let's talk about God. Your book takes on this topic, and there are different ways that people describe God. I guess an NDEer described God as a ball of light consisting of millions of individual souls. That was an experience I had one time where it was this great glowing light, and as the NDEer approached it, he saw that light was composed of like millions of souls conjoined together.
Yeah,
so
yes.
In a situation like that, do you suppose, because I don't know, do those souls retain their individuality, or are they really in the process of merging back into the oneness? They've reached perhaps the highest level of heaven in that joining together with the light, but do they retain their individuality, or are they happy and feeling blessed even to lose their memories and their personality and become absolutely one with the Creator?
First of all, the ones who enter the light and become the light are ecstatic. They're very happy to let go, and we've already mentioned that. So those people, but the light in general, and whether it's all these beings, I don't know. That's one of my questions that I have, because the light is one source, one being, one spirit that is the creator, and we are a part of it. But are we a part as an individual, or are we a part of a whole? That's something that I haven't worked out for myself yet.
I think Eastern religions deal better with that question in terms of ego and merging. Western listeners have such a tough time, and as I do myself. I love being here as Lee Witting, and to lose the Lee Wittingness of myself. But on the other hand, I can envision that ecstasy that would be such a profound gift given by the others and myself to become just a part of everything.
But there's more to it, because you don't just feel the ecstasy. You also have the knowledge to understand how it all works.
Right.
And so the ecstasy goes together with that knowledge and our egos and the lifetimes. And so it all fits together as, yeah, that's how it works.
Yes. Good. That's a good point. Wow. Well, there's a tradition in some religions of there being different levels to heaven. The seven heavens, Paul talked about in his NDE of going to the third heaven. And it may be that those heavens are self-determined levels, whereas we said earlier, at one point you're going into your own library, and at others you're merging with the light. That I imagine being the highest level of heaven.
I think that was a question I had for quite a while, but I think what happens is that the individual, when they become soul, they remember all the learning and all that they've already learned spiritually. And so they go to a level that fits where they are, because we keep coming back to learn and grow and evolve back in to the light.
Yeah. Let's talk a little about life reviews. I had a guest recently who said she was, and this is unusual, I hadn't heard this before, but during her life review, she was actually gagged and whipped and had traces of the whipping on her back in her physical body.
Wow.
Which was pretty unique, because I had never heard anything like that before.
No.
Most
I think
most
that's
life
what
reviews.
she did to herself. See, people who have negative experiences, not life review, I'm sorry, I'm not going there, but just negative experiences, hellish, when they are brought out of that experience and asked what was that all about, they are told that they created it themselves. That's where they thought they should be. So I'm wondering if that's where that woman thought that that's what she should experience.
Well, it's certainly possible.
Yeah.
It was. But after that, she had a vision of heaven, which seemed to have worked out the pain of the first part.
Yeah. There's one point I want to make on life reviews. We are all told repeatedly that we are the only ones who judge ourselves, that we don't, that we are not judged, and that we have this unconditional love constantly poured toward us. So I believe that it is because we are source. See, I take that literally. And because we are source, we're judging ourselves as source. So when we have a life review, we can see it all, because the other people's experiences and so forth, because we are part of the source. We're our source.
So we have the objectivity to judge ourselves.
Yeah. Well, because it's just like you looking at your own self and saying, I shouldn't have done that.
Right. Well, I was talking about this the other day with someone, and I said, if you're judging yourself under ordinary circumstances, you're probably either letting yourself off the hook, or you're coming down very heavy on the other side and saying, this was terrible. I shouldn't have done that, and overemphasizing the guilt. I've also been asked by people, well, if we judge ourselves midlife because we have a near-death experience, does that mean we judge ourselves when we truly die? Or are we judged by God or by judges other than ourselves?
That's a separation statement. That separates you from God. God is not separate. It's all one.
Very good. How do you account for some of the added abilities that people come back with sometimes, psychic abilities, healing abilities, and the like?
Well, I think that they put their foot into the spiritual realm, and there's a little bit still there. And when we think about it, actually, even at this physical level, if we are all source, it makes perfect sense that we can understand and have psychic abilities to connect with others. It's just logical, because we're understanding ourselves.
It's a shame that we don't all come back with supernatural abilities, but then I guess if we're the ones that are making the decision, maybe we either feel like we hadn't provided for that when we planned our lives, or we're not ready to have added powers. That we're barely dealing with the powers we've got.
Yes.
I hadn't planned to ask this question, but of all the abilities that your 2,500 people had come back with, were there any that just sort of stayed in your mind as being remarkably strong and remarkably, let me say, supernatural? It's not exactly the right word, but anyway.
Well, there was a doctor that I just read. This doctor came back as a musician. And that's happened to more than once. People having skills that they didn't have before, being able to do math. There was one girl, she was in college, and math was not her thing. So she was not even looking at that. And she came back a math whiz. So wow. it just really is quite unusual. And no, I don't have an explanation for why that happens, except that maybe it's to do with their past lives and they're tapping into something that happened then. Or it could be that maybe that they had this as a latent ability that's come out.
Yeah.
Don't know.
There was a story of a fellow who dived into a shallow end of a swimming pool and came out with the ability to play piano beautifully, and he'd never touched a keyboard in his life.
Yes. Yeah. There was one fellow that came back and he wrote a symphony. He never had no ability at all.
In your book, I won't ask you to pretend to be a physicist, but you say, recently scientists have come to the realization the universe operates much like a giant two-dimensional hologram. Yeah. And I didn't understand the two-dimensional part of it.
Well, believe it or not, the universe is two-dimensional. It's a bit, I'm into science a bit, so I'm going to try not to go too deep, and you can cut out whatever you want. What happened was that it started quite a long time ago, but there was a guy named Jacob Bekenstein, and he tried to measure black holes and how deep they went. He wanted to know how deep is a black hole, and he couldn't. He over and over and over, all he could get was the outside, and there was no explanation. So then other scientists pick up from that, and they also tried. There was two. One is a Nobel laureate, and the other one is a well-known scientist, Leonard Susskind, and de Hooft is the other guy's name. And those two men did a huge, exploration about this two-dimensional, and they come up with the same thing. They could not measure inside all they could measure was the outside. And again, and that went And so then other ones, crowded in on that. And they found that, yes, the universe is two-dimensional. That doesn't make sense to us. But the only other answer is holographic. And that fits because quantum particles are holographic in their nature. So I don't know that you can use that, but it gets pretty heavy. I have another book that I've written that I'm not going to publish, and it's science and spirituality, and it brings out this kind of thing. But it is hard for us to understand that the universe is two-dimensional because we're three-dimensional and everything here is. So what are you talking about?
Well, we've been looking for a link between science and religion for millennia. So perhaps you will eventually publish that book if it ties the two together.
Well, it does, but it's a little heavy in the science. So what I think I'm going to do is rewrite it in more simpler terms. If you're interested, I can send it to you, as is.
Oh, do. I'd love to read it. Yeah, we can talk more about it after that. I love science, but as a liberal arts student, I love science.
Yeah.
Not as a scientist.
Yeah, no, I'm not. Yeah, me too. I'm not a scientist at all. I first became interested in science in my mid-30s when I saw the first galaxy on television. And I thought, I was in awe. I thought, how did this happen? I was so taken how beautiful it was that's what started me. I wanted to know more.
Wow. Well, Lynn K. Russell, we are out of time for today. And yet we haven't half covered what you've tackled in your book. So what I'd like to do is continue our conversation on next week's edition of NDE Radio.
Oh, wonderful.
And in the meantime, listeners might order the Kindle edition of your book, Beyond NDEs, The Next Step in Near-Death Experience Research, for instant access to all the NDE reports you quote in your study. My thanks again to Lynn K. Russell for being with us today. If you'd like to hear this show again or any of our more than 500 archived ad-free NDE interviews, go to TalkZone's NDE radio site and hit the Past Shows button, or go to our YouTube channel, NDE Radio with Lee Witting, where you can subscribe to and comment on the complete NDE radio library. And be sure to check out our NDE Radio Facebook page. Just search NDE Radio with Lee Witting on your Facebook app. And listen next Monday, 11 a.m. Eastern at TalkZone for more conversation with Lynn K. Russell on NDE Radio. I'm your host, Lee Witting, saying thanks for listening.